Marcus had learned early on that the streets were unforgiving, but they were honest. Unlike the people who walked past him every day, wrapped in their own worlds, the city had no pretense. Its alleys whispered secrets, the cracks in the pavement hid stories, and the flickering streetlights revealed truths most preferred to ignore. At 37, with sun-weathered skin and eyes that had seen far too much, Marcus had become a silent observer of life. Some saw him as just another homeless man, a shadow among the crowds, but Marcus had a way of noticing things no one else did. He had to. Survival depended on it. Morning sunlight reflected off the glass buildings, casting long shadows that twisted along the sidewalks. Marcus perched on his usual bench near the corner of 5th and Mulberry, a spot that gave him a clear view of both the main road and the quieter alleys behind the old brick warehouses. A tattered backpack rested at his side, containing everything he owned: a few changes of clothes, a worn notebook, a pen with barely any ink left, and a half-empty bottle of water. To anyone else, it seemed pitiful, but to Marcus, it was his lifeline. Each object had its place, each day had its rhythm, and in this rhythm, he found a strange kind of security. From his vantage point, he watched the city wake up. Street vendors flipped sizzling pancakes, while the aroma of roasted coffee beans drifted through the air. Taxi horns blared, impatient drivers arguing with the gridlocked traffic. People rushed past, eyes down, earbuds in, phones in hand, consumed with meetings, deadlines, and errands. Marcus knew every face that passed by daily. He recognized patterns, repeated gestures, and even the subtle signs of stress etched into hurried expressions. Most ignored him, some sneered, and a few offered coins or scraps of food, but he rarely accepted charity. Pride, or maybe just stubbornness, kept him from taking handouts. He was used to the invisibility. It was a cloak that kept him alive. When a drunken man staggered down the street, or a gang of teenagers loitered near the corner, Marcus had learned to fade into the background, to become part of the urban tapestry rather than stand out. But invisibility had its drawbacks. Many nights he slept with one eye open, ears tuned to the slightest sound, the click of heels, the roar of an engine, or the sharp shouts echoing off the buildings. Danger, he knew, often arrived quietly. This particular morning was different. As Marcus sipped from his water bottle, scanning the streets with habitual vigilance, he noticed something subtle, a shadow, moving too deliberately along the alley behind the laundromat. Most people would have ignored it, assuming it was just another pedestrian or a stray dog. But Marcus's instincts tingled. The movement was precise, almost rehearsed, and carried with it a tension that didn't belong to casual passersby. His heart rate quickened slightly, not with fear, but with awareness. He had seen this before. Trouble didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it crept quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Across the street, the sound of rhythmic footsteps caught his attention. A woman in uniform walked past, her presence commanding yet approachable. Officer Donna Marcus had seen her on patrol several times before. She moved with purpose, her posture straight, her eyes scanning the environment with a practiced caution that came only from years of experience. There was something comforting about watching her. She didn't ignore the city's undercurrents the way others did. Even so, Marcus knew that her uniform could only protect her so much. Danger could erupt at any moment, and often it came from the shadows she couldn't see. Marcus studied her as she passed by, adjusting the strap of her radio. The sun glinted off her badge, and he noticed the faint crease of concern on her forehead. Police work was never easy, and Dana carried the weight of responsibility lightly, but Marcus could see it in her posture. There was a moment when she paused near a street vendor, briefly exchanging words, her hand resting lightly on her holster. She was vigilant, but no one could predict the city's next move. Marcus took a deep breath and let his eyes drift back to the alley. The shadow hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had moved closer, lingering near a doorway, almost invisible against the dark brick wall. He stood up slowly, making sure his movements weren't noticeable. His boots scuffed softly against the cracked pavement as he edged closer, keeping a careful distance. He had no weapon, no authority, no backup. All he had was awareness and a refusal to look away when something felt wrong. The alley was narrow, lined with trash bins and abandoned furniture, creating perfect hiding spots for someone with malicious intent. Marcus crouched slightly, peering around a corner. There it was, a figure, hunched, fiddling with something in their hands. Something metallic caught the sunlight, a glint too deliberate to be accidental. Marcus's mind raced. He knew he needed to act, but the risk was immense. If he misjudged, he could be harmed, or worse, the officer could be caught unaware. Yet he couldn't ignore it. He had survived so long by noticing what others overlooked, by reacting when instinct demanded it. Now, for the first time that morning, he realized he might be the only one who could prevent disaster. A strange mix of fear and determination coursed through him. He had always been invisible, but today, invisibility wouldn't be enough. Action was required. Dana moved further down the street, unaware of the imminent threat. Her radio crackled softly, a mundane update from dispatch, masking the tension building nearby. Marcus calculated quickly. If he could guide her attention subtly, perhaps she'd notice the danger before it became irreversible. But how? He wasn't supposed to intervene, wasn't supposed to risk exposure. Yet the moral imperative was undeniable. He couldn't let someone else, someone trained but unaware, walk blindly into harm. He clenched his fists and took a step forward, trying to appear casual, blending with a group of morning commuters. His eyes never left the figure in the alley. Minutes stretched like hours. The figure in the doorway adjusted something again, and Marcus's stomach tightened. He realized the glint had been a warning sign, a tiny detail signaling intent and preparation. His mind ran through scenarios, contingencies, and silent strategies. How could he signal Dana without startling the suspect? Words might be too loud. Gestures might be misinterpreted. He swallowed, steadying his breath, and decided on a plan. Silence, observation, guidance. Sometimes that was all a person needed to make a difference. Marcus took another careful step, angling his body so Dana might notice him. He waved slightly, then pointed subtly toward the alley. She glanced over briefly, her eyes catching his movement. He shook his head, a silent plea, his expression tense, urgent. Dana paused, curiosity flickering across her features. For a moment, Marcus felt a surge of hope. Perhaps she understood. Perhaps the city's unlikeliest guardian, the homeless man who had survived by watching and waiting, could avert what might otherwise be a catastrophe. The next few minutes would decide everything. Marcus lowered himself to crouch again, his attention splitting between Dana and the shadowy figure. He knew the officer's training would serve her well, but he also knew details mattered, details most people missed. The figure in the doorway was moving with purpose now, shifting weight from foot to foot, seemingly unaware of the observant eyes tracking every twitch. Marcus's pulse quickened, his breath shallow, as he prepared to guide Dana without making a sound. Today, survival wouldn't just be his own. It would belong to someone else entirely. As the sun climbed higher, the city thrummed with life, oblivious to the tension building in a small corner. Marcus had always been a ghost here, invisible and unheard. But today, invisibility wasn't enough. Today, awareness, courage, and silent communication would define the difference between disaster and safety. Marcus's eyes narrowed, muscles tensed, mind sharp. The streets had demanded vigilance for decades, and today they demanded action. He was ready. The city might overlook him. The world might dismiss him. But he knew what had to be done. The streets had their usual rhythm, a chaotic orchestra of horns, footsteps, chatter, and distant sirens. Marcus blended into it, like he always did, invisible yet hyper-aware. From his vantage point near the corner of 5th and Mulberry, he continued scanning the alleyway behind the laundromat, the spot where danger now lurked. His instincts screamed that something was amiss. The shadowy figure had shifted again, now crouched low, almost pressing against the brick wall. Marcus squinted, noticing a metallic glint, a small device, perhaps, or a weapon clutched in the figure's hands. The movement was deliberate, careful, calculated. Whoever it was, they had a plan, and Marcus had just become part of it. Dana, the officer, moved further down the street, her boots clicking against the pavement with measured rhythm. She paused near a hot dog vendor, chatting briefly with the vendor about the neighborhood's crime trends. Marcus watched her every movement, heart pounding. Her casual demeanor belied the potential danger behind her. To most people, the shadow in the alley would have been invisible, a minor detail swallowed by the city's overwhelming bustle. But Marcus had lived long enough to see what others could not. Danger had a pattern, a rhythm, a subtle signature, and the figure in the alley was already matching it perfectly. He knew that calling out to her would risk drawing the suspect's attention. He weighed his options. He could move closer, step into her line of sight, and risk exposure. Or he could rely on subtle gestures, hoping Dana's experience and instincts would allow her to read them correctly. Marcus's chest tightened. Every second mattered. He took a slow breath, adjusted his posture to look casual, and then made his first move. A wave, subtle enough not to draw attention from the alley, but pronounced enough for Dana to notice. Dana glanced over, her brow furrowing as she registered his movement. For a brief moment, a flicker of curiosity crossed her eyes. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He shook his head, pointing subtly toward the alley, trying to convey urgency without using words. The figure in the doorway shifted again, a faint click echoing in the alley. Marcus's stomach dropped. The metallic glint was unmistakable, now a small but dangerous device, wires protruding, carefully assembled. Whoever had left it there had a purpose, and the officer was dangerously close. Time was slipping away. Marcus edged slightly forward, keeping himself in the shadow of a nearby lamppost. He gestured again, pointing insistently, shaking his head. Dana's eyes narrowed, reading his intent. Her hand moved toward her radio instinctively, but Marcus shook his head slightly again, urging silence. Words could be fatal. He didn't need to speak. He needed her to understand. The city, oblivious to the tension at this corner, continued its normal chaos. Horns blared, vendors shouted, and people streamed past, unaware that a life-threatening situation was unfolding mere feet away. The figure in the alley moved with a precision that sent chills down Marcus's spine. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, as if rehearsed. The small metallic object in their hands gleamed in the sunlight. Marcus crouched slightly, pressing himself closer to the wall to remain unseen. He scanned the area for anything else that might pose a risk. Trash bins, abandoned boxes, anything that could hide another threat. He didn't see anything else. The danger was contained to this one figure, but that made it even more frightening. One wrong step from Dana or one careless glance could trigger disaster. Marcus's mind raced, running through scenarios. He had to guide her, but how? He couldn't shout. He couldn't run. He had no weapon, no authority, no official training. But he had awareness, instincts, and a lifetime of observing the streets. He knew how to read a situation, and he knew Dana's training would allow her to react if he could just get her attention. Slowly, deliberately, he moved closer, keeping a casual gait, making it look like he was heading for the corner store, all while keeping his eyes fixed on both Dana and the alley. Dana paused again, sensing something unusual in the man's behavior. "Marcus?" she called softly, recognizing him from previous patrols, though she rarely interacted. His head shook slightly, a silent warning. His eyes were wide, scanning the alley. She followed his gaze, noting the shadowed figure briefly, but couldn't immediately identify the threat. Marcus gestured again, this time more urgently, using his hands to indicate movement and caution. Dana's pulse quickened. Her professional instincts told her something was wrong. She crouched slightly, keeping herself low and ready to act. The suspect in the alley now became more active. The metallic object reflected sunlight again, drawing Marcus's attention to its details. It was small, portable, but precise, something that could be lethal if mishandled. Marcus swallowed hard. He needed Dana to notice quickly, to read his signals, and to stay calm. He stepped a little closer, motioning her toward a safer vantage point across the street. Each movement was calculated, each gesture silent. The city continued its normal rhythm, unaware of the ticking clock at this corner. Dana finally pieced together the cues. She crouched slightly, moving toward cover behind a parked delivery truck, eyes locked on the alley. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he continued signaling. The shadowy figure shifted again, now clearly preparing for something. Marcus's mind raced through all possibilities. Robbery, assault, worse. The metallic object glinted again, and he realized it wasn't just a weapon, it could be something far more dangerous, hidden and deadly. His instinct screamed that action needed to be immediate. He had to guide Dana without exposing himself to danger. Time slowed. Marcus noticed every detail. The subtle sway of the suspect's body, the glint of the object, the slight tremor in the hands that hinted at nervous anticipation. He recognized the signs of someone ready to act violently, but unaware of observers. Dana, crouched behind cover, watched him closely, her eyes now locked on the alley. Marcus pointed again, this time with his whole body, urging her to move carefully. His mind was a whirl of scenarios, contingency plans, and silent commands. Each second mattered, and each breath could change the outcome. The city seemed to fade around them, the usual chaos muted by the intensity of the moment. Marcus and Dana were focused solely on the alley and the figure within it. He felt a strange adrenaline surge, not fear, but sharp awareness. He had survived countless nights on these streets, but this was different. This was not about him. This was about someone else's life, someone with authority, someone whose training alone couldn't guarantee survival. His silent intervention might be the only thing keeping disaster at bay. As the figure moved again, Marcus noted every detail, the deliberate placement of the metallic object, the subtle glances toward the street, the careful adjustment of posture. He recognized preparation, intent, and danger. His mind raced, forming a plan. Guide, signal, observe, react. Dana's eyes met his briefly, acknowledging understanding. They shared a silent communication, a connection born of instinct, awareness, and urgency. Marcus had never felt more alive, more purposeful. Today, invisibility was useless. Today, action was mandatory. He crouched lower, moving closer to the edge of the street, keeping Dana in his peripheral vision. He gestured once more, subtly but urgently, signaling her to stay alert. Dana's hand rested lightly on her holster, ready for any sudden movement. Marcus knew the seconds were slipping, and the suspect might act at any moment. He held his breath, eyes fixed, calculating, waiting. Every instinct screamed vigilance. Every movement mattered. The city's rhythm continued, indifferent, while a life-threatening scenario unfolded quietly on the corner. Finally, Dana seemed to understand fully. She moved slightly behind better cover, positioning herself with tactical awareness, eyes locked on the alley. Marcus's heart raced, a mix of relief and tension. The shadowy figure shifted again, unaware of the silent observer, coordinating with the officer. Marcus remained crouched, guiding, alert, a silent guardian in a city that had long ignored him. And next moments would determine the outcome. He had no control over events, only influence. And sometimes, influence was enough to save a life. Marcus glanced back briefly at the passers-by. None of them noticed the tension building here. They were wrapped in their daily routines, unaware of the danger inches away. Marcus felt a strange mix of isolation and purpose. He was invisible to the world, but his awareness mattered more than ever. He had never felt this kind of responsibility, this kind of power to prevent harm. As Dana steadied herself, preparing for whatever came next, Marcus whispered silently to himself, a mantra he had repeated through years of survival. Watch, act, survive. And then, movement, a subtle shift in the alley, confirmed his worst fears. The figure had spotted something, or perhaps they were preparing to act. Marcus tensed, heart hammering, mind calculating possibilities. Dana remained crouched, eyes scanning, muscles coiled. Marcus knew the moment of truth was approaching. His role was clear. Guide, signal, observe, and hope that his silent intervention would be enough. The city continued unaware, as if holding its breath, while two unlikely allies prepared to face a hidden danger together. Marcus's pulse pounded in his ears, the rhythm almost matching the distant hum of city traffic. From his vantage point, the shadowy figure in the alley shifted slightly, fingers brushing against the metallic object. Marcus recognized the gesture instantly: preparation, intent, focus. Every instinct in his body screamed that the officer had no idea what was coming. He had survived countless dangers on these streets, but this situation felt different. This wasn't about food or shelter or avoiding a gang. This was life or death, and he was the only one who could prevent disaster. He crouched slightly behind a dumpster, trying to remain inconspicuous while still keeping Dana in sight. Her silhouette behind the parked delivery truck provided some comfort. She was in cover, but she was still dangerously close to the alley where the figure lurked. Marcus's mind raced, evaluating every option. Shouting would alert the suspect. Running risked exposure. Gestures had to be precise, urgent, and unmistakable. He considered the best way to communicate, pointing, nodding, shaking his head, using body language as a code. The city around them faded into background noise. All that mattered was the figure in the alley and the officer he had to save. Marcus took a slow, controlled breath. He motioned again, hands moving subtly but insistently, indicating the direction of the figure. His eyes locked onto Dana's briefly, hoping she understood. She paused, head tilting slightly as if processing his signals. The subtle frown of concentration crossed her face, and Marcus's heart leapt with a mixture of hope and fear. Time was slipping, and the figure was now adjusting the metallic device, oblivious to the world outside the alley. The metallic object glimmered under the morning sun. Marcus's stomach tightened. He had seen weapons before, improvised and deadly, but this was different. This was calculated, careful, and clearly intended to harm. The figure's movements were controlled, almost mechanical, betraying a meticulous mind. Marcus realized that if he miscommunicated, if Dana misread the signals, the consequences could be catastrophic. He shifted slightly, keeping his hands visible, but making no sudden motions that could attract attention. He had to be precise. Dana's eyes scanned the alley again, slowly narrowing. She caught a glimpse of the glinting object and tensed. Marcus gestured once more, this time using both hands, pointing toward the alley while shaking his head subtly to signal caution. He could almost feel her awareness snapping into focus. Every detail mattered. The position of her feet, her hand on the holster, the angle of her body behind the truck. Marcus had learned long ago that survival depended on observation. Every minor detail could save a life or end it. The figure in the alley shifted again, now standing slightly taller, glancing toward the street as if expecting someone. Marcus's eyes followed the motion carefully. There was a tension in the air, an almost electric charge. The city seemed oblivious. The background hum of traffic and chatter, contrasting sharply with the deadly precision unfolding just feet away. Marcus's heart hammered, every nerve alert. He had spent decades surviving by noticing the unnoticed. Now, those decades of experience were about to be put to the ultimate test. He gestured one last time, urgency radiating from every movement. Donna's gaze met his, and she finally seemed to understand. Her hand moved to her radio, but Marcus shook his head subtly. Words could be fatal. The figure in the alley was close enough to hear or see anything abrupt. Marcus's face hardened with concentration. The city had ignored him for years, but today he had one chance to make himself count, one chance to prevent disaster. Failure was not an option. The figure now took deliberate steps toward the metallic object, adjusting its position, checking angles. Marcus's stomach nodded. He estimated the distance between the alley and Dana, just enough that a sudden action could reach her before she could react. He considered moving closer, but that would put him directly in the line of sight. He stayed hidden, relying entirely on his silent guidance. Every muscle in his body coiled, ready for action, but he could not act yet. Timing was everything. Donna crouched slightly, moving carefully behind better cover, her eyes locked on the alley. She adjusted her stance, keeping her body low while maintaining a clear line of sight. Marcus nodded ever so slightly, signaling approval. She was ready, and he silently prayed his warnings had been enough. The figure in the alley moved again, now crouched over the metallic device, seemingly adjusting wires with precision. Marcus could almost feel the potential energy, the danger waiting to explode in the wrong hands. Marcus's mind raced through contingencies. What if the figure noticed him? What if Dana miscalculated? He had no authority, no weapon, but he had something arguably more powerful. Awareness, instinct, and the willingness to act decisively when it mattered most. He scanned the surrounding streets for anything else that could complicate the situation. Delivery trucks, stray pedestrians, stray cats, nothing. All eyes and energy were focused on the alley. Marcus exhaled slowly, keeping his body still, knowing that any sudden movement could ruin everything. Minutes or maybe seconds stretched into eternity. The figure in the alley straightened slightly, glancing toward the main street, a faint smirk playing across their lips. Marcus's heart skipped. The threat was real, imminent, and dangerously close. He motioned again, this time more aggressively, pointing toward the figure while shaking his head. Donna's eyes followed his gesture, her awareness now fully engaged. She shifted slightly, positioning herself with tactical precision. Marcus's chest tightened, adrenaline coursing through him, but he remained silent, invisible, yet critically important. Then, a sudden sound of metallic click echoed from the alley. Marcus flinched. The figure had adjusted the device, perhaps armed it, perhaps preparing to act. Dana's gaze sharpened. She read his signals perfectly now, eyes locking on the potential danger. Marcus gestured one final time, urging extreme caution, and then froze completely, blending into the background. Every nerve in his body was taut, every instinct screaming readiness. The city hummed around them, unaware that a life-or-death situation hung by the thinnest of threads. Marcus's mind replayed decades of survival instincts. He remembered nights hiding from aggressive gangs, mornings scavenging for food in abandoned buildings, and moments when silence had saved him from certain death. Now, silence and observation were all he had to protect someone else. The figure in the alley moved again, hunched, glinting metallic object in hand. Marcus tensed, eyes flicking between Dana and the suspect, every muscle ready to respond. One wrong move from either of them, and the consequences would be irreversible. Donna's hand rested lightly on her holster, eyes scanning every subtle movement in the alley. Marcus's gestures had worked. She understood. She adjusted her position behind the truck, staying low, focused, and ready. Marcus remained hidden, a silent guardian, fully aware of the danger. The figure in the alley now seemed to sense something, shifting slightly, scanning the street. Marcus froze completely, holding his breath, letting Donna's presence be the anchor for the unfolding situation. Timing, patience, and observation, his truest allies, were now in play. Finally, the figure began moving slowly toward the street, unaware of Marcus's silent guidance and Dana's strategic positioning. Marcus's heart hammered as he prepared to act if necessary. Each second was critical. Each gesture, subtle but meaningful, could be the difference between safety and catastrophe. The city around them continued, blissfully unaware, as Marcus and Dana prepared to face a threat that most would never notice. Marcus knew that invisibility could no longer protect him. It was his action, his awareness, and his courage that would determine the outcome. In that tense moment, the world seemed to narrow down to three elements: Marcus, the officer, and the figure in the alley. Everything else, the traffic, the pedestrians, the vendors, the distant hum of sirens, faded into insignificance. Marcus's mind was razor-sharp, calculating distances, predicting movements, and guiding the officer without a word. Donna's training complemented his intuition perfectly. Together, they formed an unlikely, silent team, ready to confront a threat that had the potential to change everything in an instant. Marcus knew words would betray him. One loud syllable, one mistaken sound, and the figure in the alley could act in an instant. Silence had always been his shield. Now it was his weapon. He crouched low, pressing himself closer to the edge of the street, hidden by a stack of worn cardboard boxes. His eyes flicked to Dana, then back to the shadowy figure. Everything depended on non-verbal cues, gestures that carried urgency, precision, and clarity. He raised his hand slightly, palm down, a subtle signal meaning, stay calm, prepare to act. Donna's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the meaning instantly. She lowered herself further, knees bent, muscles coiled for action. Marcus gestured again, pointing toward the alley without moving his head abruptly. Each motion was deliberate, precise, communicating urgency without drawing attention. The city continued its oblivious rhythm. Horns blared, engines rumbled, conversations spilled into the air, but Marcus existed in a bubble of tension. His focus narrowed to the essential: the figure in the alley, Dana's positioning, and the timing of their response. The shadowy figure shifted again, stepping closer to the metallic device, now partially obscured by a dumpster. Marcus tensed. Every fiber of his being screamed that the device was dangerous, that any sudden move could trigger catastrophe. He extended a hand slowly, fingers twitching, signaling Dana to remain still. "Don't speak," his gesture seemed to say. The simplicity of the command carried weight. No words, no hesitation, just action and awareness. Dana read it perfectly, her breath steady, eyes sharp, ready to respond to whatever came next. Marcus's heart raced, yet his mind remained methodical. He analyzed every subtle twitch, every flicker of movement, every detail that could indicate intention. The figure adjusted the device, a faint click echoing against the alley walls. Marcus's pulse quickened. He could almost sense the energy, the potential for disaster, the split second where everything could go wrong. He gestured again, pointing slightly to the side, urging Dana to adjust her angle of approach. She shifted subtly, moving behind a better piece of cover, while keeping the figure within her line of sight. The city seemed to fade around them. Marcus was acutely aware of the distance, the spacing, the angles of potential danger. Every pedestrian, every parked car, every stray object could influence the unfolding situation. Yet nothing distracted him. His life on the streets had honed this kind of awareness, a sixth sense for danger, an ability to predict movement and react instinctively. Now, that instinct was guiding someone else, someone trained, but not yet aware of the imminent peril. Marcus's hands shook slightly, but he maintained control. One sudden motion, one miscalculated gesture, could be fatal. The shadowy figure crouched lower, adjusting the wires of the metallic object. Marcus held his breath. Dana's eyes locked on the figure, muscles coiled, ready to act. Marcus's subtle signals guided her positioning, ensuring she had the clearest vantage without exposing herself. Their silent communication was a dance of life and death, and Marcus was leading. The metallic object glinted in the sunlight. Marcus's stomach tightened. He recognized the components from news stories, from briefings overheard years ago when he had observed police drills from a distance. The small device could cause significant harm if mishandled. Marcus's mind raced, formulating contingencies. He couldn't touch it. He couldn't disarm it. All he could do was ensure Dana had the perfect positioning to neutralize the threat safely. His gestures had to be precise, timed, and unmistakable. Dana shifted slightly, following Marcus's guidance. Her eyes never left the alley, scanning every subtle movement. Marcus pointed again, this time toward the side, signaling her to adjust her angle, just enough to remain hidden, but maintain a clear view of the device. He held the gesture, watching her compliance. The figure in the alley seemed oblivious to their presence, absorbed in whatever task they were performing. Marcus's breath caught. Every second was critical. Timing, patience, and observation would determine the outcome. A sudden movement from the shadowy figure, just a slight step backward, sent Marcus's pulse skyrocketing. He clenched his fists, controlling the urge to call out. "Don't speak," he reminded himself silently. The slightest sound could provoke a reaction, and they had no margin for error. Dana's eyes locked onto his again, confirming understanding. Marcus nodded ever so slightly, a subtle reinforcement of the unspoken command. Together, they formed an unlikely, wordless team, ready to respond to a danger that most people would never notice. The alley seemed to close in around the shadowy figure. Marcus's gaze flicked to potential obstacles, trash bins, abandoned boxes, anything that could provide leverage or cover for the suspect. Nothing moved. The figure was entirely focused on the metallic object, adjusting it with meticulous care. Marcus exhaled slowly, forcing calm over the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had survived life-threatening situations before, but this one felt different. It was about someone else's life, someone he could guide but not directly protect. Marcus gestured again, a small, precise motion, urging Dana to maintain her focus and readiness. She complied seamlessly, crouching lower, adjusting her stance, her eyes sharp and alert. Marcus could sense the tension radiating from her, matching his own heightened awareness. They were synchronized in their silence, a partnership forged in instinct and observation. Outside the bubble of danger, the city continued, unaware, indifferent, but Marcus's focus never wavered. The metallic object now seemed fully armed, the glint of wires and small components reflecting sunlight. Marcus's pulse surged. He gestured once more, subtle but deliberate, signaling Dana to stay patient, to wait for the exact moment to act. The figure in the alley shifted again, now moving slightly closer to the entrance of the alley. Marcus's stomach tightened. He had no weapon, no authority, no backup. All he had was awareness, intuition, and the ability to guide someone trained to act decisively. That had to be enough. Dana adjusted her position further, hands steady on her holster, eyes scanning the figure. Marcus's gestures were precise, guiding her to maintain safety while keeping the figure within her line of sight. The city around them continued obliviously, a harsh contrast to the heightened tension of the moment. Marcus felt every detail: the movement of the suspect's hands, the shift in posture, the glint of the metallic object, and he knew the importance of timing. One wrong move could spell disaster. A faint click echoed from the alley. Marcus tensed. The figure had made a small adjustment to the device, a subtle but potentially deadly motion. He gestured again, signaling Dana to be ready, to stay alert, and to act only at the precise moment. His hands trembled slightly, but his focus remained unwavering. The unspoken understanding between them, the officer and the homeless man, was now their greatest weapon. Silence, observation, and timing were the keys to survival. Marcus's heart raced, yet his mind was sharp, calculating, precise. He watched the figure move carefully, unaware of the silent observer orchestrating a defense. Dana remained perfectly positioned, her eyes trained, muscles coiled, ready to act on the slightest cue. Marcus held his breath, hands frozen, eyes locked on both Dana and the shadowy figure. The city's usual clamor faded into insignificance. Nothing existed beyond this alley, this device, this critical moment. And then, Marcus noticed a final detail. The suspect had overlooked a loose brick near the device. It could be an accidental trigger. His mind flashed through possibilities. He gestured urgently, indicating to Dana to maintain extreme caution. Dana read the cue instantly, her body tightening, eyes locked. Marcus's silent guidance had brought them to the brink, poised for action. He knew now that everything depended on the next split second, the next instinctive reaction, the next precise movement. Marcus exhaled slowly, mentally preparing for what had to come next. The shadowy figure was moments from completing their task. Dana's body language indicated readiness, awareness, and discipline. Marcus's gestures had communicated everything words could not. "Don't speak," the mantra echoed silently in his mind. Invisibility, vigilance, and precise nonverbal communication had brought them here. Now, survival hinged on patience, timing, and a silent understanding between two unlikely allies. Marcus's eyes never left the alley. Every twitch of the shadowy figure's body, every glint of sunlight on the metallic object, registered in his mind. His breath was slow, controlled, but his heart thundered in his chest. He had seen many dangers before, but this one felt different, calculated, deliberate, and silent in its deadly precision. The city continued around them, blissfully unaware, as he and Dana prepared for the worst. The officer remained crouched behind her cover, muscles coiled, eyes trained, waiting for the subtle signals only Marcus could provide. Then Marcus noticed a small detail that changed everything. A faint chemical odor, almost imperceptible in the street's usual blend of exhaust and coffee, drifted from the alley. His stomach tightened. Years on the streets had honed his senses. He had learned to detect danger by smell, by sound, by subtle shifts in posture and movement. This odor was a warning. The metallic object in the figure's hands was no ordinary weapon. It was something far more dangerous. Marcus felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Dana's eyes followed his subtle gestures. Marcus pointed toward the object with precision, his fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. She narrowed her eyes, adjusting her stance, understanding the warning. The figure in the alley remained unaware of the silent communication unfolding nearby. Marcus exhaled slowly, forcing calm over the tension coiling in his body. He had guided her this far. Now it was crucial that every detail was observed, every potential risk accounted for. One misstep, one unexpected motion, and disaster could strike. The metallic object glimmered again in the sunlight, wires protruding from its casing, carefully assembled. Marcus's heart pounded. It was clearly an explosive device, small enough to be carried and concealed, yet powerful enough to cause serious harm. His eyes scanned the surroundings again. No civilians, no immediate obstacles. The threat was contained, but the stakes were higher than anything he had faced before. The officer he had been silently guiding could act, but only if she recognized the danger fully. Marcus's role, invisible yet critical, could determine life or death. Dana adjusted her position, keeping low behind the truck, hands ready on her holster, eyes locked on the alley. Marcus signaled again, pointing precisely at the device, shaking his head subtly to communicate caution. She responded immediately, reading the warning in his gestures. Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he saw her focus sharpen. The figure in the alley adjusted the device again, unaware of the invisible observer tracking every motion. Marcus's mind raced, calculating timing, positioning, and the potential sequence of events. Suddenly, a loose brick shifted under the device, revealing more of the object's intricate setup. Marcus recognized the components instantly: wires, small cylindrical casings, a timer mechanism. His breath caught. He had read news stories, heard police briefings from a distance, and seen the remnants of similar devices before. The danger was real, imminent, and precise. Marcus gestured urgently, indicating to Dana to maintain maximum caution. Her posture stiffened, eyes narrowing, fully understanding the gravity of the situation. The figure in the alley crouched lower, adjusting wires with meticulous care. Marcus's pulse quickened. He realized that any sudden movement could trigger the device. The city around them continued its rhythm horns, chatter, engines, but it was irrelevant. Marcus's focus narrowed to the alley, the officer, and the device. He gestured again, small but deliberate, pointing at the wires while shaking his head in warning. Dana followed, her training aligning perfectly with his instinctive guidance. Together, they formed an unspoken partnership, ready to prevent catastrophe. Marcus's heart raced as he noticed something subtle: a faint wire protruding from the device, almost hidden against the shadowed brick. If disturbed, it could detonate the device immediately. He gestured with extreme care, signaling Dana to adjust her angle slightly to get a better view without disturbing anything. She shifted smoothly, maintaining a low profile, eyes scanning every inch of the alley. Marcus felt a mix of fear and fear for the potential explosion, relief that Dana could act with perfect timing if needed. The shadowy figure now stood upright, glancing toward the street as if ensuring no one had noticed their actions. Marcus's stomach tightened. He had to act quickly, to guide Dana to the best vantage point, without revealing their position. He gestured subtly, indicating where she should move, and she responded instantly, understanding the silent cues. Marcus's experience on the streets had taught him patience, observation, and precision. Today, those lessons were more critical than ever. Suddenly, a brief gust of wind stirred the alley, causing the wires to twitch slightly. Marcus's pulse accelerated. He gestured frantically, urging Dana to freeze and maintain her position. Her eyes flicked toward his, confirming understanding. The moment was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Marcus could feel every second stretching, every subtle motion of the figure magnified in his awareness. The metallic object gleamed in the sunlight, an ominous promise of danger. Marcus held his breath, knowing that one wrong move could end everything. The shadowy figure bent down, adjusting the device's placement carefully. Marcus's mind raced. He had to ensure Dana was positioned perfectly to act safely if needed. He signaled her subtly again, pointing to a safer line of sight, shaking his head to emphasize caution. Dana responded immediately, moving slightly, but staying low, hands steady, eyes locked on the alley. Marcus felt a strange mix of pride and fear, pride in his ability to guide her, fear for the danger still present. As the figure continued their work, Marcus noticed a small, almost imperceptible detail. The device had a timer mechanism. It was counting down silently, hidden from casual observation. Marcus's chest tightened. They had very little time. His gestures became more urgent, signaling Dana to prepare for immediate action once the figure completed their adjustments. Dana's eyes widened slightly, registering the urgency without a single word spoken. Marcus's experience, intuition, and vigilance had brought them to this critical juncture. Finally, the figure in the alley seemed satisfied, straightening and stepping back slightly. Marcus's eyes locked on the metallic object, confirming his worst fears. The device was fully armed, ready to detonate with the slightest disturbance. He gestured forcefully, signaling Dana to stay alert, to maintain her stance, and to be ready for immediate action. Dana's body language mirrored his silent instructions, perfectly, eyes locked, muscles coiled, ready. Marcus exhaled slowly, preparing for the next critical phase. At that moment, a sudden sound echoed from the alley, a faint metallic click. Marcus flinched, realizing the figure had unknowingly activated part of the device. Dana stiffened, responding instantly to his guidance. Marcus's eyes were locked on both the officer and the suspect, anticipating the next move. The stakes were higher than ever. One wrong motion, one sudden sound, and the device could go off. Marcus had spent years surviving the streets, relying on observation and intuition. Now, those skills were being tested to their ultimate limit. Marcus gestured subtly but urgently again, signaling Dana to maintain perfect positioning. She crouched slightly lower, ready to act at the precise moment. The figure in the alley adjusted the wires one last time, unaware of the silent observer orchestrating the response from behind cover. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had become the difference between disaster and survival, the unseen guide whose awareness was now critical. Finally, Marcus realized that the moment of revelation was upon them. The device's potential for destruction was clear. Dana was ready, aligned perfectly with his subtle guidance. The figure in the alley, oblivious to their presence, had fully armed the device. Marcus's heart pounded, every sense heightened. The city continued around them, indifferent to the peril in its midst. Marcus and Dana shared a silent understanding. The danger was fully revealed, and only precise timing and calm action could prevent catastrophe. Marcus felt the adrenaline surge through his veins. The shadowy figure in the alley had fully armed the device, unaware that Marcus's vigilant eyes had tracked every subtle movement. The metallic object gleamed in the morning sunlight, wires protruding like veins of danger. Every second felt stretched, heavy with anticipation. Marcus gestured once more to Dana, his hand tilting toward the figure while shaking slightly to indicate extreme caution. Now he silently commanded, "Act carefully, precisely." Dana's muscles tensed, her stance fluid yet deliberate. Her training kicked in instantly, but she knew that Marcus's silent guidance had brought her to the optimal position. She adjusted her angle slightly, maintaining cover while keeping the device fully in view. Marcus watched her movements closely, heart hammering. One false step, one misjudged motion, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Yet he also knew that Dana had the skill, and he had the experience to guide her through this critical moment. The figure in the alley moved slightly closer to the device, bending over it again. Marcus's breath caught. Time had shrunk to a heartbeat. He gestured subtly but urgently, signaling Dana to prepare to intervene while maintaining perfect caution. Dana's eyes locked onto his, understanding the silent cues instantly. Her hand hovered near her holster, ready, but her focus remained on observing the device and the suspect. Marcus had trained himself for years to notice details others overlooked. Now, every twitch, every glint of metal, every subtle shadow mattered more than ever. Suddenly, the figure made a slight adjustment. It caused one wire to shift precariously. Marcus's stomach tightened. A wrong movement could trigger detonation. He signaled Dana sharply, fingers pointing toward the unstable wire while shaking his head to emphasize caution. Dana responded immediately, adjusting her stance to get a safer angle. She remained perfectly silent, coiled like a spring, her gaze never leaving the suspect. Marcus felt a mixture of fear and determination. He was no longer an invisible observer. He was a vital part of this high-stakes scenario. Marcus's mind raced, anticipating the suspect's next move. Every gesture was calculated. The figure in the alley, oblivious to the silent observer orchestrating their response, continued adjusting the device. Marcus exhaled slowly, forcing calm. He had survived countless nights on these streets, relying on observation, stealth, and timing. Now, that experience was guiding someone else's survival. One subtle motion, one precise intervention, could prevent disaster. Marcus's hands remained steady, his gaze locked, every sense sharp. Dana finally made her move. With controlled precision, she shifted her position slightly, adjusting her angle to maintain optimal visibility of the device while staying fully behind cover. Marcus watched her, silently encouraging the fluidity and confidence of her actions. The suspect in the alley remained unaware, engrossed in their work. Marcus's mind calculated contingencies. What if the figure noticed them? What if a wire snapped? He gestured again, subtly guiding Dana to anticipate movement and maintain perfect control. The tension stretched, almost unbearable. The metallic object glinted in sunlight, wires taut and ready. Marcus's senses were acutely tuned to every subtle change in the environment. A shifted shadow, a rustle of paper, the faintest click. Each detail mattered. Dana's eyes met his briefly, confirming understanding. She was ready to act on his silent cue. Marcus took a slow, controlled breath, his body rigid with focus. The city around them continued its usual rhythm, oblivious, while life and death hung by the thinnest of threads. Then it happened. The figure in the alley bent down further, shifting the device to a precarious angle. Marcus's pulse surged. He gestured forcefully, pointing to the unstable section, while signaling Dana to prepare for immediate intervention. She moved with controlled precision, drawing the device into her line of sight while staying fully protected. Marcus felt a surge of anticipation and fear. Every second was critical, every motion life-threatening. He could only guide her with gestures now, hoping his signals were clear enough to prevent disaster. Dana's training merged seamlessly with Marcus's guidance. She adjusted her stance, eyes locked on the device, muscles coiled. Marcus gestured again, subtly but urgently, signaling her to be ready for action the moment the suspect made a move. The figure in the alley remained focused, unaware of the imminent intervention. Marcus's mind raced with possibilities, analyzing every wire, every component of the device, every subtle motion that could indicate a dangerous misstep. Timing, precision, and awareness would decide the outcome. Suddenly, the suspect made a motion that threatened to destabilize the device. Marcus's heart skipped. He gestured sharply, signaling Dana to act immediately, but with extreme caution. She responded instantly, moving into position while keeping her cover intact. Marcus's pulse raced as he observed, every fiber of his being alert. The city's noise faded into insignificance. Nothing mattered except the alley, the device, the officer, and the subtle guidance of a man who had survived the streets by noticing what others ignored. The moment arrived. Dana lunged with calculated precision, grabbing the device carefully while keeping it stable. Marcus gestured one last time, guiding her hands, ensuring her positioning avoided triggering any sudden movement. The suspect, realizing too late, turned abruptly. Marcus held his breath as Dana reacted instantly, controlling the situation with skill, speed, and a calm discipline honed through years of training. The metallic device remained stable, silent, and contained. Marcus exhaled slowly, tension flooding out of his body. Dana had neutralized the immediate threat. She stood behind cover, eyes scanning the figure, ready to respond if anything else occurred. Marcus's gestures had guided her every move, silently orchestrating a rescue that could have ended catastrophically. The suspect froze, realizing the intervention too late. Marcus watched silently, remaining hidden but alert, ready to act if necessary. The city continued around them, unaware, while two unlikely allies had faced danger together. The figure in the alley made a sudden attempt to flee, but Dana reacted instantly, moving with controlled authority to intercept. Marcus signaled subtly, guiding her to position and angle while remaining safely behind cover. The suspect stumbled, realizing escape was futile. Dana's presence, combined with Marcus's silent guidance, had successfully neutralized the immediate threat. Marcus's chest tightened with relief. He had survived countless dangers before, but none so consequential as this, guiding someone else to safety through careful observation, timing, and instinct. Finally, Dana secured the suspect while keeping a watchful eye on the device. Marcus's silent communication had made the difference. He exhaled fully, letting the adrenaline drain slowly from his body. He remained hidden, yet his role was undeniable. Without his vigilance and guidance, the outcome could have been disastrous. Dana glanced toward his position, eyes meeting as briefly. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, unspoken but powerful. Marcus's presence, though invisible to most, had been vital in preventing tragedy. Marcus remained crouched, scanning the surrounding streets for additional threats. The city had continued its rhythm throughout the ordeal, oblivious to the silent drama that had unfolded in a single alleyway. He felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. Relief that Dana and the surrounding pedestrians were safe. Satisfaction that his instincts and awareness had directly influenced the outcome. He had survived by noticing the unnoticed, by acting with patience and precision. Today, those skills had saved a life. As Dana secured the suspect and the area began to calm, Marcus finally relaxed slightly. The immediate danger had passed, and the metallic device was contained. He remained in the shadows a moment longer, ensuring no further threats lingered. The city's rhythm resumed around him, indifferent yet alive. Marcus had been invisible, yet essential. Unnoticed, yet critical. He had acted decisively when others could not, guiding a trained officer through an imminent threat with nothing but silent gestures and keen observation. The alley had finally fallen silent. The suspect was restrained, the metallic device contained, and the immediate danger neutralized. The city continued around them, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded just moments ago. Marcus remained crouched in the shadows, eyes still scanning, pulse gradually slowing. His chest heaved slightly, the weight of adrenaline slowly lifting. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion, relief, and quiet satisfaction. He had survived countless nights on these streets, but never had he played such a pivotal role in protecting someone else's life. Dana straightened slowly, breathing deep, her eyes still locked on the suspect. She glanced briefly toward Marcus's position, her gaze sharp yet reflective. There was a moment of acknowledgement, subtle yet profound, in her eyes. Marcus had guided her through the entire ordeal, invisible yet indispensable. Her hands relaxed slightly on her holster, but her awareness remained heightened. She had survived many dangerous encounters in her career, but the clarity, precision, and timing of Marcus's interventions had saved her today. Marcus finally emerged from behind his hiding spot, moving cautiously toward Dana. he was careful not to startle her, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. The alley still carried the faint smell of danger, the residual metallic tang from the device, and the faint chemical hints that had signaled its threat. Marcus's mind was replaying the sequence of events, analyzing each gesture, each subtle cue, each instinctive decision that had ensured their survival. He allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. Dana turned fully toward him, her expression a mix of respect, gratitude, and disbelief. You saved me," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of genuine admiration. Marcus shook his head, brushing it off, as he always did. Words had never been his strong suit. Silence had always been his refuge, his shield, his language. But Dana's acknowledgement was enough. For the first time, he felt that someone truly understood the significance of his presence, his vigilance, and his quiet heroism. The suspect, now secured, was being moved toward a waiting police unit. Dana remained alert, ensuring there were no additional surprises. Marcus watched, noting every detail: the professionalism, the control, the precise movements that reflected years of training. He realized that his role had been complementary. His street instincts had guided Dana's official expertise, creating a partnership forged in necessity and survival. For once, his invisibility had translated into visible impact. The neighborhood began to take notice. Residents peeked from windows. Passers-by slowed, murmuring questions about what had occurred. News crews had yet to arrive, but the buzz of curiosity was palpable. Marcus stayed near Dana, keeping a low profile, but ensuring that nothing escaped his attention. The streets that had always been his domain now felt strangely different. He was no longer merely an observer of danger. He had intervened, influenced events, and saved a life. The realization filled him with a quiet sense of pride, tempered by the modesty that had defined his life on these streets. Dana approached Marcus fully, her posture relaxed, yet still alert. "I need to know your name," she said, her voice carrying authority, but also warmth. Marcus hesitated. He rarely introduced himself. Names had always been inconsequential in his world. Identity was fluid, survival was constant. But today felt different. Today, he had made a difference, and Dana deserved to know who had guided her through the crisis. Slowly, he offered his name. "Marcus," he said quietly. Dana nodded, committing it to memory. "Marcus," she repeated, a sense of respect and gratitude threading through her tone. "I don't know how to thank you, but you saved my life. You need to be recognized for this." Marcus shook his head again, a habitual gesture. Recognition was not his goal. Survival had always been enough. But Dana persisted. She reached for her radio, speaking quickly and clearly, providing a report of the incident, highlighting Marcus's role as the silent observer whose vigilance had prevented tragedy. The response was swift. Backup units arrived, officers approaching with curiosity and cautious admiration. Marcus remained in the background, letting Dana communicate the facts. She detailed the sequence of events, emphasizing the crucial guidance that had come from Marcus's keen observation and silent signaling. The officers listened, some exchanging glances of surprise. It was rare for a civilian to intervene with such precision and insight, and even rarer for someone with Marcus's life experience, someone who had survived the streets to orchestrate a successful intervention in real time. Marcus watched as the device was carefully disarmed by the Bond squad. His attention to detail and instincts had provided the perfect timing for Dana to act. He felt the tension finally ease, replaced by a cautious satisfaction. The city's usual noise returned, but it no longer carried the same weight. Today, something extraordinary had occurred in these ordinary streets. Marcus had made a difference not by authority, but by awareness, patience, and decisive, silent action. Dana approached him once more, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You're going to need to give a statement," she said. Marcus hesitated. He had never interacted with authorities beyond necessity. Statements, paperwork, recognition, they were foreign concepts. But Dana's tone carried assurance, and he realized that this was more than protocol. It was acknowledgement, validation of his skills, courage, and vigilance. Reluctantly, he agreed, understanding that the story needed to be told. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the alley, Marcus allowed himself to relax slightly. He had guided, observed, and influenced events that could have ended tragically. The danger had passed, the suspect was secured, and Dana was safe. For once, his presence mattered to someone beyond survival, beyond the invisibility he had long embraced. Today, he had been more than a bystander. Today, he had been a guardian. The officers completed their investigation, confirming that the metallic device was indeed a potentially deadly improvised explosive. Marcus's observations, communicated silently to Dana, had prevented detonation. The acknowledgement from law enforcement and the officer reinforced the significance of his actions. Marcus's role, though silent and unassuming, had been critical. He had taken his life experience and street awareness, transforming them into a life-saving intervention that would resonate far beyond this alley. Dana turned fully to him, her expression resolute. "You saved more than my life today," she said softly. "You reminded me why vigilance, awareness, and courage matter. You're extraordinary, Marcus." For the first time, Marcus allowed a small, rare smile. Recognition was unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, yet the sincerity in Dana's tone made it feel deserved. He nodded quietly, a silent acknowledgement of her gratitude. The neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Vendors resumed their work, pedestrians continued their routines, and traffic flowed as if nothing had happened. Yet Marcus and Dana knew the truth. Something extraordinary had occurred here, unseen by most, but deeply felt by those who had lived it. Marcus remained near her, silently observing the aftermath, ensuring that no residual danger lingered. The quiet heroism of his actions lingered in the air, invisible yet palpable. As evening approached, Dana finally released him from the immediate situation. She handed him a small card with her badge number. "If you ever need help, or if anyone questions your role, contact me," she said. Marcus accepted it without words, tucking it carefully into his worn jacket. It was more than a card. It was validation, acknowledgement, and a connection that transcended the streets he had long navigated alone. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Marcus stepped back into the shadows of the city he had long called home. The streets, familiar and unforgiving, welcomed him silently. Yet something had changed. He had intervened, guided, and influenced events that could have ended in tragedy. Recognition, even subtle, had found him. Dana's acknowledgement and the officer's understanding were proof that invisibility could still matter, that quiet vigilance could save lives. Marcus vanished into the city's flow once more, a silent guardian whose heroism was quietly etched into the memory of a single, extraordinary day. The city had returned to its familiar rhythm, the hum of traffic, distant sirens, and chatter of pedestrians, blending into the usual urban symphony. Yet for Marcus, the world felt subtly altered. The alley, once merely a backdrop to his survival, now carried the memory of a day that had changed something fundamental not in the city, but in him. He walked the familiar streets, eyes scanning the corners, the shadows, the subtle movements, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the events that had unfolded. He thought of Dana, the officer whose life he had silently helped save. He remembered her calm precision, the trust she had placed in his gestures, and the fleeting acknowledgement in her eyes that had meant more than words ever could. Marcus had always been invisible, accustomed to the city's indifference, but today he had been seen in the most important way possible. His awareness, his patience, and his instinct had mattered. For once, he had not just survived, he had intervened, and that intervention had saved a life. Marcus paused at a street corner, the sunlight casting long shadows across the pavement. He reached into his jacket and touched the small card Dana had given him. Her badge number, her words of gratitude, a tangible symbol of recognition. He had rarely received acknowledgement in his life, but this was different. This was validation, not of wealth, authority, or social standing, but of the skills and instincts that had kept him alive for so long. He smiled faintly, a quiet, rare smile, feeling a weight lift from his chest. The day's events played back in his mind with clarity. The first glint of the metallic object, the subtle gestures exchanged with Dana, the tension of anticipation, and the precise timing that had neutralized the threat. He remembered the shadowy figure in the alley, absorbed in their task, oblivious to the silent presence, guiding them toward failure. Marcus's pulse quickened even now at the memory, but alongside the adrenaline was a deep satisfaction. He had acted decisively, invisibly, yet effectively. The city had not noticed, but it did not matter. As Marcus continued walking, he reflected on his life on the streets. Years of invisibility, of survival through observation and instinct, had prepared him for this moment. Every danger he had faced, every night spent navigating unseen threats, had contributed to his ability to act in perfect timing. Today, all those experiences converged into a single decisive series of actions that had prevented tragedy. The realization filled him with a quiet pride, a subtle reassurance that even those overlooked by society could make a profound difference. The streets around him carried their usual mix of life and chaos. Vendors called out, pedestrians hurried by, traffic flowed incessantly. Marcus observed everything, as always the subtle cues, the unnoticed details, the small movements that others overlooked. Yet his mind lingered on the extraordinary event of the day. For once, his vigilance had been rewarded not by survival alone, but by acknowledgement, gratitude, and the knowledge that his actions had saved a life. He felt a rare sense of purpose. Marcus thought again of Dana, the officer who had trusted him implicitly without question. He replayed the silent communication, the subtle hand gestures, the timing of her movements. They had formed an unlikely partnership, forged not by words or authority, but by instinct, awareness, and trust. Marcus had guided her through danger, and she had executed the necessary actions with precision. Together, they had prevented a catastrophe. He allowed himself a quiet satisfaction, knowing that this collaboration, though fleeting, had been perfect. He remembered the moment of recognition, Dana's hand on his shoulder, her eyes reflecting respect and gratitude. It was unusual for Marcus to feel seen, yet this acknowledgement resonated deeply. For so long, he had existed on the margins, a silent observer of a city that rarely noticed him. Today, he had been central, indispensable, and for the first time in years, that mattered. The realization left him contemplative as he moved through the familiar streets, blending into the life around him while carrying a private sense of accomplishment. The events of the day also left Marcus reflecting on human connection. He had spent years navigating isolation, mistrust, and invisibility. Yet through a single shared experience, he had connected with someone who valued his insight, who understood the power of observation and timing. Dana had seen him not as a homeless man or an outsider, but as a vital partner in a life-or-death scenario. That recognition, fleeting but profound, revealed to Marcus that even the most overlooked individuals could form meaningful connections and make a lasting impact. Marcus paused at the edge of a small park, watching children play and couples walk hand in hand. Life continued in its ordinary patterns, indifferent to the extraordinary events of the alley. Yet Marcus knew that he had altered the course of at least one life irrevocably. He thought of Donna's voice, calm and resolute, the subtle tension in her body as she executed his guidance. He recalled the moment she secured the suspect and neutralized the device. These memories, vivid and intense, reminded him of the importance of vigilance, patience, and courage. For Marcus, today had been transformative. He had acted not for recognition, not for reward, but because he could. He had utilized every skill honed through years of survival: observation, intuition, timing, and quiet decisiveness. And yet, he had also received something unexpected: acknowledgement and gratitude. The combination of action and recognition had a profound effect on him, reshaping his perception of his place in the world. He felt a quiet hope that, even in a city that often ignored him, his presence could still matter. As evening approached, the city began to glow with the golden light of sunset. Marcus walked slowly, reflecting on the day and the subtle changes it had wrought in him. He understood that life on the streets would continue to be unpredictable, harsh, and often unforgiving. Yet he also knew that his skills, instincts, and awareness could still shape events in ways others might never recognize. Today had proven that even the invisible could be powerful, that silent vigilance could prevent disaster, and that courage and observation were forms of heroism. Marcus paused on a familiar street corner, the memory of the day's events etched clearly in his mind. He thought again of Dana, the officer who had trusted him, relied on him, and acknowledged his crucial role. Their paths might never cross again, but the connection, brief and profound, had left a lasting impact. Marcus allowed himself one last reflection. Heroism did not always require recognition, but when it was acknowledged, even quietly, it had the power to transform perception and self-worth. Finally, as night fell and the city lights flickered to life, Marcus disappeared into the familiar rhythm of the streets. His journey continued, as it always had, but now with the knowledge that even in invisibility, his actions could resonate profoundly. The day had tested him, affirmed him, and quietly celebrated his skills and courage. Marcus, the silent guardian of the city, had acted decisively, saved a life, and left an indelible mark on someone who would remember him forever. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly seen.